Hi, and welcome to this webcast. Today we'll be discussing the topic of ID verification, or IDV for short, and the impact that IDV processes have for operations teams in banks. My name is Christian Sorensen. I'm head of product at Iron Group, and together with me I have Martin Gales, who comes with significant experience in the operations part. Martin, can you say a few words about yourself?
Yes, and thank you for having me here, Christian. It's a pleasure. So today I'm leading the IT application operations for Iron Group, making sure that countries are up and running, and have for the better part of a decade been managing operations, IT security and compliance and risk and operational excellence in global banks.
And speaking of banks and operational excellence, I'm seeing a tendency for the banks that I engage with that is becoming an increasing burden next to the compliance burden. But what is really impacting operations teams in banks these days?
I think on the forefront of the mind is, of course, that the services needs to be up and running because if they're not, we're not making money. And that is a paradox because you also have a business that wants to invest more in developing the product and less in operating it. So it's always, you can say, a balance, but it's also, you can say, an environment where you really need to understand your business and you really need to understand how you balance the compliance and delivering stability and trust versus keeping it cost effective.
Mm. But in many ways, as we have moved towards more digital and digitized services, the operations team has maybe not literally, but moved out of the back office much more towards the customer-facing part of the business.
Yeah.
So these operations teams, they must play a significant role in onboarding the new customers and help building that trust relationship with the customer and the bank, or between the customer and the bank.
And that's a really good observation. So when I started in IT, we were just in the back of a server room. We were never visible, and things were just always, you fix that. At some point, there was this whole thing about IT security and compliance flying in, and it became more relevant that is something that we needed to stay on top of. And that was credentially, a lot of that was done on the servers, on the hardware by IT operations. And it was costly. And of course, if you're sitting in a bank, you need to manage your profit and loss, your return of investment. Then suddenly you have a high degree in interest, and how do we actually balance that in a good way? Specifically for the past, I would say, decade or so, I've seen a very big increase in where you actually bring not only IT with you towards the business side because it has such a big impact, but you also bring the knowledge with you on how you can look at products and services from a reliability perspective, what does it take to keep up and running, and how do you also create the necessary trust? We all know, I think most of us has tried when we need to do something, we need to access our net bank, and it's not working. What's going on? It's often that which creates frustrations and that makes us think we need to do something else. Then I'm really missing a button where I can move money faster. That's a nuisance, yes, but if you don't have access to your money when you need it, that's a problem.
And also, if you try to onboard through a bank, if you decided to become a customer of a bank and the front door literally is closed due to the systems not being available, you will walk away and probably not try again another day.
Yeah. Look, so the whole idea with consumerization, where we have the users and out in the, you can say, society that are pulling the need, everything is easy and accessible. You want something, it's right there. If it doesn't work, you go to the next one. And in a minute, you have trust, and it takes very little to lose it. It takes a lot to rebuild. And this is actually what banks needs to do. They need to be trusted because they're keeping your data. So if you can't do that, then you lose business. It's very clear.
But from an operations perspective, banks have typically had, many banks, also banks that I've worked with, have had sort of a protective approach that, okay, if it has to be done right, we better do it ourselves. Is that still a dominating way of thinking in the banks, or are banks more seeing the benefit of having standardized solutions and services?
think historically it has very much been banks, when you look at the bigger tier banks, where they have a mindset about you shall not pass, you cannot, where you don't know how to ensure that we can trust what you do, to a mindset where, because of operational excellence, because the margins that are being chased, because of the rising compliance requirements, and also banks that often have technical debt, you need to look to other solutions. You can no longer have the mindset that we do it better than everyone else and we can do it cheaper, because that is often no longer true. You have the possibility today to go out and buy something that is living up to the requirements, that can provide a better cost base often than what you can provide yourself. And I think one of the most important things is you can also get access to experts that can help you how to promote your digital offerings in banking to your clients, which is enabled by, for example, IDV solutions that we can deliver standardized out of Iron Group today.
So what I'm hearing is that the consistency across services is becoming increasingly important from an operations perspective.
Yeah, imagine you're sitting in a bank today where you have to do this for yourself. You need to build it up, you need to think it up. That is very complex. We know there is a lot of requirements that you need to know in depth. We know it's a very complicated landscape. You lose trust, you're out. Or you can choose to partner up with someone that already have this and do that, like we do today, for keeping a country running for decades, or we do that out in the world. You can take some trusted partners that can bring that right to you in an easy and convenient way, where you just pay for what you use, and probably a lower way than what you do today. Things are safe and secure. We know that because that is already what they do in their day-to-day business.
And also, since in many cases these risk scenarios that you need from operations perspective to protect yourself against are increasingly faster moving targets. So you need access to expertise to keep up.
Exactly. And that leads into a whole other domain, which is very relevant in bank, is the risk allocation, where we all know managing risk and, of course, optimizing profit. But there's also something that you need to allocate part of your business result in terms of if the risk actually materialize, and you need to have mitigating plans for that. So, of course, if the risk occur, you need to free up the money to actually invest in that, and that goes out of your in the end, your bottom line end of year. So you really want to make sure that you're able to address these risks, so you can actually free that up to create a better result for your business. And to do that, of course, you need the experts that can come in and do that convincingly.
I remember from my time in banking and doing the product and business development and such, we often ended up seeing compliance and operations and risk as almost competitors for the budgets internally in the bank. Is that still the case, or are we seeing more collaboration across business operations and compliance to do maybe not just operational excellence, but business excellence as such?
Yeah. That's and I almost get a very warm on my heart here, because that's the good old days where you had to go in with your boxing gloves. I think what drives it now and makes it more balanced in a good way is that it's very much driven from the board of directors that have some expectations to the result, which is tied back into the risk. So you have to balance it. And that means that often the budget is also, of course, prioritized, but still today it is, of course, more prioritized towards the development. You want to use more on developing your features and your services, where it must be balanced in operations, back to how little can we get away with to stay compliant. And even so, if you do that in a bank, there's also another way. If you then need to live up to a new standard that are coming in, a compliance requirement, you need to sit down and make sure that is integrated into your solution, which is something you need to allocate hours, money to do that. Or do you want to look at a standardized solution that actually delivers this to a market of banks that actually share the cost? That's the whole standardization part, and makes it easier for you, so you don't have to do that yourself. You focus on your business.
And also, as the standards and regulation that we see, it isn't no longer just confined to banks, but it actually applies to a lot of different actors. So it's the same solutions for identity verifications that even national states are using today. So
Yeah,
if it's good enough for a state, it's probably also good enough for a bank.
exactly. And luckily, we cover both in the solutions that we do today. We both manage it for national critical infrastructures, which keeps, what does it take to keep a country running? But it's the same approach we put into the standardized solutions. It's the same requirements, but the mentality around how do you make that always run and, of course, keep that effective, that is a balance that have only come through decades of trial and error. And this is what we have applied into this.
And the whole fraud and risk perspective is a constantly moving target. So even though we've spent a lot of time building a solution that we take to market, it will never be finished, right? It's we need to constantly improve and upgrade.
Exactly. The whole movement of AI that are coming in are making it more easy for people that wants to do harm to your business to actually create something sophisticated. And you can even imagine, I would imagine something like a payslip or something. I guess that would be an obvious thing. You could easily go in and have AI do it. Maybe you can today see it's made by AI, but it won't be long because then you won't be able to see if it's AI, and you also won't be able to hear it.
So actually, even though the topic of today is identity verification, it is, in a broader sense, document verification and even data verification that a bank needs to strategize about.
When do you know, Christian, that it's actually, now I know I'm sitting with you in the same room. I can see you. You're probably not AI. But if we were not sitting together, there will not be a guarantee that you are actually the person I were talking to. And that is so important. If we look back to the whole thing about in banks, it's about trust. Imagine a world where your customers don't trust your offerings. And how much does it take for them to not do that? It's just so little. And if the market is moving so fast, you want some experts to help you ensure that you keep that trust, that are specialized around the whole identity verification landscape. Not only how you do it from a banking perspective, but I mean, when I talk to bankers on the business side, they wanted to, what are your biggest problems today? And they say, okay, we actually, the whole compliance side, Martin, we spend at least 30% of our time on compliance. And this was quite some time ago for me. And we also just want to make sure that we can deliver our offerings to the customers. But we also acknowledge at that time that IT is integrated in this, and you need to be at the forefront with us to be able to tailor those offerings. I would then question, how many banks do they actually do that, bring IT out to the clients to figure out how to integrate it in a good way? With a standardized solution and with the experts and thought leaders we have on this in, for example, our group, that is ready and available for anyone on the business side that wants to accelerate any kind of service offering, right in your grasp.
Yeah, and then the ID verification doesn't just become a barrier or checkpoint you need to go through, but it's also a point where you, as a bank, can gather the data of a certain quality and consistency that you need to operate your business, but also offer the service at the level the customers expect.
Exactly. What do the customers expect, if you ask them, is probably that they have access to the service, but they also expect that things are kept safe. And you can either choose someone out in the market that can do that cheap, but no guarantee they actually where the data stored, or you can choose someone that have actually done this for a very long time and has stand the trials of times and times again. I mean, for me, the choice would be very clear, because if I don't hold the trust in a bank, then I'm out of business. And I would also add the opportunity in a bank to integrate into, for example, an identity verification not only goes in one service. If you can make something that collects your customers into a palette of services with a loyalty to you, it would also be, you can say, they will be less prone to looking elsewhere, because back to, it must be easy and convenient. Do you make it easy and convenient for your customers?
And also because it's not just during onboarding, you will face your bank's choice of identity verification. Due to increasing requirements, you will be forced to re-authenticate or revalidate your identity towards your bank.
Exactly. So that's a really good point. And there's, and again, if you have a transaction view on this, you also know your business case, and you're able to calculate that. And there are also ways of course, if you are in a bank, there are also a way to make sure the transaction meet your actual need. Again, to do that, you need experts at the table, experts that are often not available because your primary business is making money through your banking services.
You mentioned business cases. Can
Yeah.
you shed some light on the whole ROI discussion? What should a bank
Yeah.
put emphasis on when they consider making investments into these kind of services?
I think the one of the key things that if there's one thing that is important, that's really to ask yourself the question: is there an argument for us to do this ourselves, or are we just interested in the value? And I'm asking this question because that has been the history, and banks have been, we are the only one that can insure customers' data, where I think it's maybe less so today, whereas there are some market leaders in this that can really help you accelerate that. Are you interested in managing a very complex compliance agenda for a self-developed verification mechanism, or are you interested in tapping into the whole breadth of services that you can get from a standardized IDV solution from someone that actually do that not only for one bank or for one country, but do that for multiple? Imagine having that knowledge at your hand when you need to look at your services.
And also getting back to the point about the checking the authenticity of the document. If Iron Group, will come with 500 years of history in the identity space and work closely with identity document issuers across the globe. So our document coverage is significant, which means that the banks and other users of our services can really trust that, okay, we can validate whatever identity document that a user brings to the table.
Exactly, and we stand by that. It's tried and tested, and it's and even so, if you're sitting out there and you know, okay, maybe we have that. One thing that I at least experience from time to time when I talk with different banks and customer services, when they ask me, how can you? Okay, I need to ask you a few questions, Martin, to verify that you are you. Some banks, of course, I've seen are actually now starting to promote digital ways of identifying, but again, how safe are they? However, sometimes I experience that they ask me, can you just tell me your address, or can you tell me your CPR number? And then I tell them that, and then they say, okay, good, what do you want? And that's kind of scary when you live in a world where AI, predominantly are making it just much faster for the whole fraud and also for the cybersecurity landscape. You really need to consider, how do you provide an easy, accessible, trusted service for your clients?
Yeah. So for banks simply to keep up, they need to look at the operational improvements they can do related to ID verification.
Yeah, I would imagine there is not only a need from the market to do this because you want to stay relevant, and it must be easy. Also, like, why do you have net banks? It's not necessarily a good business case, but everyone else has it if you don't have it. The same with identity verification. If you're not doing it, you're not moving.
Yeah.
How do you see now? I'm very much in the moment here. How that looking back. How do you see it in a few years' time, Christian? How will the market develop, and what should the banks be aware of?
I think many banks are asking themselves that question, and some of them are also asking me. So I have had indeed that conversation with banks, and there's no doubt that banks are expanding their trusted role from guardians of monetary assets to guardians of data assets. And I think that will increase the requirements and expectations of trustworthiness and reliability and many other things towards the banks, because I mean, as much as we like our money and want them kept safe, one of the best things about having money in a bank and using electronic payments is if something goes wrong, we know somebody is liable to fix it. We know somebody will be hit on the head and be told to refund you the money, and you will be made whole. So basically, money is fungible. I don't care if I get the same 100 euros that I lost, as long as I get 100 euros. When it comes to personal data or other digitized assets, it's not the same thing. They are not necessarily fungible. And when it comes to identity, God forbid anybody loses my identity data because I don't want a new identity. I'm pretty happy with the one I have. So I think that the pressure towards banks, but also at the same time, an opportunity for banks to be that trusted custodians of these assets.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of approaching it. My view on this is also that it's going to keep growing, and we're not going to manage the compliance and security agenda of the future with AI and other stuff with how we did it a decade or two, God forbid 2 decades ago, where it was barely existent. We need to be in the forefront of that, and this is also what we realize when we look at, again, with the operation side in Iron Group. How do we standardize? How do we ensure that it's the same way we approach a solution to a bank to the way we do it for how we take care of a country? Things need to work. Things need to be safe and secure. It also needs to be easy and convenient, so it's not slowing down your time to market, which is historically what, if you talked about compliance, how was it in the past, competing for the budget, it slowed it down a bit. We need to bring it to the front, but in a way so it just seamlessly are integrated in the way the solutions are offered. And then, of course, you should not pay as much for meeting the compliance requirements in a standardized solution as if you do it internally. Why have that headache today? I'd rather give it to someone else that then has a high degree of trust and history for keeping that running.
As an operations guy, of course, you mention and clearly like standards and standardization, which can, of course, improve operations. But is there a risk that if everything becomes standardized, that all banks will become the same and they will have a hard time differentiating? Or is standardization actually a way to free up the resources for them to differentiate on the business side instead?
I think to a large extent in banking and financial institutions, you do want to differentiate on your product, service, and offerings. The standardization, however, is good because it allows you to have more focus on operational excellence. You can lower your cost base, and you can also free up some of the allocated risk pool. So in these areas, you kind of want to have standardization. Yeah, there needs to be a good question. Why don't you want that to be a standard when it's a minimum requirement to be compliant?
Yeah. And I think it also highlights the trust element that if a flow can be recognized by a new customer, that gives them more confidence and more trust from the get-go.
Exactly. And that's actually, when people ask me what I do today in operations, I don't say I do operations and server. I say I create trust. I say, but you're not delivering. I am ensuring that when it gets in, we deliver the trust and then it's easy and it is accessible. Like a user that needs to access your mobile bank, it needs to work. And that is something we actually bring into how we do today. Now we talk standardization, but we actually go out with that in the beginning and make sure that is just an easy onboarding journey.
With that, I would like to thank you very much, Martin, for taking the time. It's certainly an interesting opportunity and interesting future ahead of us here. And I think we will have many more conversations between us. And if any one of our listeners today have more questions or would like to continue the conversation, feel free to reach out. Thank you so much for taking the time, Martin.
Always welcome, and thank you for having me.